Well, I'll just say again, thank you for coming out this morning and for either all or at least part of the lectures. If you were here last night, you'll recall, or if you didn't make it last night, let me just sort of pick up where I left off with the last lecture. And that is that the case for a market economy is partly on the idea that it enhances the material well-being of people in society by creating an institutional arrangement in which we can take advantage of division of labor. The imagery is of the one that Adam Smith, the famous 18th century economist, explains in The Wealth of Nations, that man could try to produce everything that he needs by himself. The imagery of Robinson Crusoe stranded on his desert island, having to produce his own food, make his own clothes, build his own shelter, prepare his own tools so that he doesn't have to go wading out into the lagoon trying to catch fish with his hands. He from a branch of a tree makes his own spear. From the vines on the trees, he puts together a crude fishing net. But everything would then have to be done by himself. And if we think about it, if we had to produce everything that we needed to survive through our own efforts, our own knowledge, our own physical abilities, the limited resources that might be surrounding us in our particular circumstances in which we find ourselves, we would certainly see that our standard of living would be extremely low. The advantage of division of labor, as Adam Smith explains in the opening chapters of his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, is that by dividing our labor and specializing in different steps of a production process, we enhance the speed, the dexterity, the experience, the skill, and the complementarity of multitudes of different types of work being able to be done simultaneously and then coordinated with each other. And that this enables a vast increase of productivity in the varieties of goods, the qualities of goods, the quantities of goods that are available to us in society. And then, as I was explaining, Smith gets to the next point, is that, well, if people are specializing in a division of labor, what incentives are there for people to actually produce things that others might want? Because one person becomes the butcher, one becomes the baker, the other the tailor and the candlestick maker. What will create an incentive and an opportunity for them to be producing things that others want? And Adam Smith then presents, as I was explaining last night, his system of natural liberty, in which each individual is free to pursue any profession, occupation, trade that he chooses to. Now, in this setting, he argues that there will emerge an arrangement in which each individual may be pursuing his own self-interest. How can I improve my circumstances? How can I get the things that will make my life better? Each individual may be pursuing his own self-interest, but in a certain political, institutional setting, in his own self-interest, he will have to be motivated to act in ways that, while improving his own circumstances, enhances the well-beings of others as well. And as I was explaining, that institutional arrangement is one of individual liberty, private property, and voluntary exchange. Individuals own themselves. They can own the resources and the raw materials that they produce things with. And relationships are based upon voluntary agreement. In other words, I can't compel you, I can't force you, I can't coerce you to do things that I would like for you to do. Well, if I can't kill you, and if I can't steal from you, and I can't defraud you, then how do I get what you have that I desire, but which I can't force or compel you to give to me? Then that means that I have to devise a way that is successful in getting you to want to give me what you have. But that means I must be able to give you something in turn, in trade, in exchange, that you value more highly than what I would like for you to give to me. Smith therefore concluded that in such a setting of freedom, property, and voluntary exchange, with division of labor, each individual in his own self-interest will have to ask himself the following question: what is it that I could produce? What is it that I could produce that others would be willing to take in trade in exchange for the things that they possess, that I desire. Therefore, as he says, this creates this idea of the invisible hand, that each individual, while pursuing his own self-interest, and though it may be no part of his conscious intention, ends up acting in ways that improve the conditions of others in society as well. And as I was concluding yesterday, leading up to the themes for some of the lectures today, I live in Michigan. I go shopping in the supermarket and I buy my bread. Where does this bread, the bread come from? Well, it's made in a bakery. Where does the bakery get the ingredients from which to bake the bread? Well, somewhere among other manufacturers and producers in my society, there is, let's say, some wheat farmer in the state of Iowa. Now, this wheat farmer is specializing in the growing of this particular crop. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know I exist. He may not even have ever heard of the town or the city in which I live. And he has no sort of altruistic desire to just be working in on his farm in the state of Iowa to grow the wheat that will eventually be one of the essential ingredients in the loaf of bread that I end up buying at my supermarket. But he's doing this. And why? Even though he doesn't know me, he has no interest in me, he may not, as I say, even know I exist as an individual. Because in the division of labor of these market exchanges, he has decided that given his skills, his abilities, the resources at his disposal, the farm that he owns, and also his likes, maybe he likes farming, by specializing in wheat production, he can produce a product that others value enough to pay him a price for. And with the income he earns from growing and selling that wheat, he is able to go into the market as a consumer himself, and with the earned income, buy all the things that other people have produced that he's desiring to possess and use. Now that means that in his own self-interest, he's helping to make a product that I desire, bread, even though he doesn't know I exist. And that's what Adam Smith means. Each individual is pursuing his own self-interest, and though it is no part of his intention in the process of doing so in this arena of exchange, he ends up producing things that others desire to improve other people's lives, including my own. I buy a loaf of bread from which I'm then able to make a sandwich that I might want to eat. Now, as I was concluding yesterday, if men divide their labor, and if we are interdependent in this way, how then do we coordinate all the activities that are going on in the world? How do we coordinate all the activities going on in the world? You are a small island country. You import a vast amount of the goods that you need every day. You don't have huge manufacturing plants to make clothing, to manufacture cars. Many of the foods that you normally purchase and eat, that you acquire in the supermarkets, all of this, you are dependent upon multitudes of now billions of people around the world. How do they know what to produce? How do they know what you want? How do these products get manufactured? In ways that match it. Or again, as I would tell my students at my university, here we are sitting in Midland, Michigan. And there are people on the other side of the world right now, in China, who are working in factories that will end up helping to make products that get exported from their countries, imported to the United States, and some Chinese products, I presume, get to the Bahamas as well. It seems like you turn over the label, it says made in China. Everything is made in China. Everything? How can everything be made? But it seems like everything is made in China. How do these people on the other side of the world, and literally, I mean, it's like 10,000 miles away, how do they know what we want? And to be manufacturing it so that it's available when we would desire to purchase it, in the qualities and features and characteristics that we're looking for in a product, that we take for granted. We go into the store, oh, I want food, I need something to, a new shirt or a pair of pants. It's there. How do they know what we want? They don't know anything about us. They don't know we exist. They'll never meet us, just as we'll never go there. I actually was in China in January. It's big. A lot of things going on there. Okay, big. 1.3 billion people. Okay. Some guy, when China started opening up, to the West and trade, some businessman wrote a book called "If They Only Buy One Shoe." You make 1 billion sales if they only buy one shoe. Not even a pair, just one. It's a lot of bucks you can make from selling one shoe. Anyway, but how do they know? Now, in turn, the Chinese don't sell us commodities, or how put it, they don't just give us their commodities out of generosity and altruism. They're selling us goods so they can earn income from selling those goods, and with part of the income they will have earned, to buy the things from us that they cannot manufacture or produce as productively or as efficiently or as well as we in other countries can. In other words, they pay for their imports that they want from us by exporting things that we desire. Well, how do people in the United States, and perhaps some product even here in the Bahamas ends up being exported to China? How do you know, how do we in the United States know what it is that people in China on the other side of the Pacific Ocean would desire to purchase? And that is our means of payment to buy and exchange what we're importing from them. We are separated from each other by time and space, right? We are separated from each other by time and space. Now, the space is easier to understand. We're thousands of miles separated from each other. But what do I mean when I say we're separated by time? Well, let's take the example of food. If I want to eat today, somebody must have grown something on a farm a year ago, right? A crop season, right? A year ago. If I want to buy that loaf of bread in a supermarket today, somebody must have been planting that wheat at least a year ago. So we're not only separated from each other by space, but time. People must be making decisions today as to what to produce, what to manufacture, in farming, what to grow, in the anticipation of what people will want in the future. And these are these people who you know nothing about. So you're not only separated from people who might want to buy your product by space, but you're separated from the people who might want to buy your product by time. Because all production takes time, right? You plant the seed, it grows, then you harvest it, and that takes time. You build, you want to have a new resort, right? They're building new hotels. I'm driving along the coast road here. These people are anticipating that there'll be tourists who want to come here years from now. And they're making that expectational judgment today. Who are these tourists who are going to come? How do you know they'll want to come? What information do you have? What's the indicator, the signal, to even form a judgment about this? This is what your investment decisions are based upon. Now, this point here is the idea that it is the price system that coordinates all the activities of all these people in the world. This is an idea that was developed by an economist named Friedrich A. Hayek, H-A-Y-E-K, in a famous article, not only in that article, but he's most famous for an article that he wrote in 1945 called The Use of Knowledge in Society. The Use of Knowledge in Society. It's in fact one of the reasons, the value and the contribution that has come to be seen in the arguments in this article. It was one of the reasons why he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1974. He was born in 1899 and he died in 1992, and he received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1974. 1974. Hayek argues partly in this article, and we're going to talk more about him in the next lecture about why socialism failed, because part of his argument is essential to understand the limits and the impossibilities of the alternative to a market, that is, whether a socialist planning system can work or not. But what he argued here is that the role of prices is to economize on information. Prices economize on information. Market prices economize on information. It is not necessary for everyone in China who might be participating in production processes to make the goods that they end up being exported to the United States, to the Bahamas, to all the other parts of the world, to know us, to be informed about us, to have knowledge of us as individuals. Nor is it necessary for us as consumers to know who these people are in China, for example, who might be able to make products that we desire, what their potential abilities are and their skills and their educational background in having expertise to do so. It is not necessary for us to do so. They do not need to know us, and we don't need to know them. The Iowa wheat farmer who ends up growing the wheat that contributes to the preparation of a loaf of bread that I may buy in Midland, Michigan, months after the crop has been harvested, I don't need to know him, and he doesn't need to know me. It is sufficient if we communicate with each other through the prices of the market. It is sufficient if we communicate with each other through the prices of the market. What does it mean to communicate? Well, let me use an example that Hayek uses in this article of his, The Use of Knowledge in Society. He says, imagine that there's a potential tin miner in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia. Should he mine tin and offer to sell it on the market? He doesn't know that potential tin miner in Malaysia. He doesn't know all the people around the world who might have a use for tin. What kind of uses for tin? Well, it could be to making the cans that go in, that are used to sell processed food, right? The can with the corn and the peas and the Campbell's soup. It might be the type of tin that goes into the fixtures in a room, such as, I assume that is some type of a tin type product that might have gone into the duct there. Or even the little piece of tin that attaches the eraser to the old-fashioned wooden pencil. There are all these and multitudes of other conceivable uses of raw tin that could be then going into a manufacturing process to make these types of products and many others. Well, this potential tin miner in Malaysia, he doesn't know any of the people who might want, and he cannot know them. The world is too big and too complex for any one of us to know more than a handful of people out of the entire now, 6 or 7 billion people in the world. So then how does he decide whether he should incur the expenses, the investment costs, the time, the effort to mine tin out of the ground in Malaysia? And Hayek's answer is that all that is necessary, the minimum amount of information, is for him to know that there are people who want tin and place a certain value on it as reflected in the market price that they are willing to pay. It is not necessary for him to know potential tin buyers in Europe, in the Americas, in Australia, in other parts of Asia or Africa. It is not necessary. It is sufficient, Hayek argued, that those people who desire tin for whatever manufacturing purpose for which the raw tin could be a useful input, it is only necessary for them to express their valuational judgment and willingness to pay a particular price. I will pay so much for a ton of tin. I would pay so much for a ton of tin. I would pay so much of a ton of tin. And those prices that people are willing to offer in their various parts of the rest of the world for tin informs him, therefore, as to whether there are people who value it enough that they'd be willing to pay a particular price reflecting a sum of revenue he could earn by, well, if that's the price per ton of tin, and if I were to mine and make available so many X number of tons of tin, well, X number of tons of tin times that market price tells me the revenue I could earn. Well, fine. He now knows that there are people somewhere out there who will never know, he'll never meet. He has no idea of the particular and detailed and specific purposes for which they might want to use tin. It is sufficient that he knows that there are people who value it enough who are willing to offer him a price on the market. If you sell me X number of tons of tin, this is the price per ton I'm willing to pay you. Fine. So should he mine the tin? Well, that depends. He knows then what price he could earn by selling tin on the world market. He might have an estimate of how many tons of tin the buyers might be willing to pay, to buy at that per ton price. But does that tell him yet whether he should produce the tin? No. Because what's involved in extracting tin out of the ground? Labor, resources, machinery, time. Okay. And all of that involves him hiring, renting, purchasing, using this vast array of different ingredients, resources, raw materials, capital machinery, labor of different types and qualities and experience to do different facets of the tin mining that he could undertake where he is in Malaysia. Well, who are these people who could do these jobs, and what are their alternatives? Is he the only businessman in the world? No. There are other businessmen in Malaysia itself and in the rest of the world who also have what? Demands for resources and raw materials, uses for capital, machinery, and equipment, hiring of labor of different qualities, characteristics, experience, skills, and abilities for their own production processes. To make other products, to satisfy other consumer demands. He doesn't know all those other businessmen who also might have alternative competing uses for the same types of labor, the same types of machinery, the same types of resource and raw materials that he might want to draw upon if he were to decide that it was worthwhile mining the tin out of the ground. Also, what about the land on which the tin could be extracted? Is his use of this mountain, let's say, in Malaysia, the only use of that land? Could it not be the site of a manufacturing complex? Could it not be used for tourists, for recreational purposes? Could it not be used for the building of residential housing? Yes, all of those. That land might have alternative uses as well, that other people would value for those purposes also. So how does he know what those other resources have as alternative uses and the value they have for those alternative uses? He can't know all of these resource owners and potential employees. He can't know all of the different businessmen who might want to hire, use, and acquire those resources and machineries and laborers for themselves. He can't. And Hayek's point is, it's not necessary for him to know all the alternative uses and reasons for the competing applications of those, as the economists say, factors of production. It is sufficient if there are market prices for those factors of production. Don't work for Joe, work for me. And if you work for me instead of Joe, I value your services enough that I'll pay you $1 more an hour. Don't, Mr. Machinery Manufacturer, don't make a machine for Sam to dig tin out of the ground. Use your factory facilities to make a machine for me so I can make some other product, like coffee machines. Because consumers want coffee machines also to have their morning coffee in their homes. So in the marketplace, the competing businessmen, the competing entrepreneurs, the competing enterprises, who also are attempting to earn a living by making other products that consumers might want as well, enter the market for resources and raw materials and labor, and they bid against each other. On what basis? On the basis of what they think those resources and machines and workers are worth in making some other product that they believe consumers are willing to pay a price for. And out of these competing bids of businessman A and businessman B and businessman C and businessman D, including our potential tin miner in Malaysia, emerges the prices of the factors of production. And now the enterprise, or the businessman, has two sets of prices to compare. The selling price of the finished good, that people are willing to pay him for the particular product that he can provide to them, whether it be a finished commodity like a finished suit of clothes, or the raw tin that he could dig out of the ground and sell to other manufacturers who want to refine that raw tin into usable forms, such as the tin can that then is used to sell the processed corn or peas in the supermarket. And on the other hand are the prices of the factors of production here. What he can sell for his product for the people who want the tin, and the prices of the factors of production that he would have to incur to decide whether it is profitable or not to hire, employ, invest in, undertake a particular enterprise. And again, he doesn't need to know all the different consumers who might want to buy his tin. He doesn't need to know all the alternative employers who are competing against him for the employment and the hiring and the purchase of those factors of production, land, labor, and capital. It is all encapsulated in the market prices. And on the basis of those market prices, what could he then compare? He can now compare profit and loss. Profit and loss. Okay. So this is what potential demanders of tin would be willing to pay me. These are the prices I would have to pay myself to hire a sufficient number of workers of the skills, experience, background, abilities that I would need to do the various steps and stages of the tin mining. These are the prices I would have to pay for the machinery, the tools, and the equipment to do the tin mining. These are the other resources and raw materials that I would need to work with the labor and the machines to do the mining of the tin. Now, given the price that people would be willing to pay me for the tin, if I successfully extract it and offer it to sell for sale, and these are the prices I would have to pay to purchase, hire, rent, use, employ those factors of production. Which is greater, the selling price or the cost prices? If the selling price is greater than the cost prices, this is telling him that all things considered, the consumers value more highly the tin that he could mine than others value the resources that he would have to pay for to do the tin mining, and therefore there is a profit to be made. That the value of the final product he can produce, in this case is tin, is more valuable than the resources that would go into its manufacture. And therefore he could make a return. Or it could be the other way around. This is if he were to find out that the value of the raw tin that he could extract and sell on the world market is less than what it would cost him to hire the workers, purchase the machines, get the resources and raw materials, that the cost prices were greater than the selling price. This is telling him that implicitly in the eyes of consumers, other products are more valuable to manufacture and produce and supply than the particular tin that he could extract and offer on the market. And why do I say more valuable? Because why are those other businessmen willing to offer prices to hire the workers, purchase the machines, acquire the resources, raw materials, use a particular piece of land for a particular purpose? Why are they willing to pay prices that together come out to be more than the value of what he could get for the tin he could extract. Because those other businessmen are judging what they think their products could sell for on the market, that they could make instead: the clothes, the hats, the food, the coffee machines, the this, the that, with the same resources. And the prices that they're willing to pay reflect what they believe they could get for the products they could manufacture instead. If I think I could make a product that could earn me $10 from you, the consumer, and some other businessman believes he could make a product that you, the consumers, would also be interested in buying, but would only pay $8 for, then who can afford to pay more for the resources to employ, including workers, to make those products? Surely the person who thinks that the consumers would be willing to pay $10 for his product would have a motive, an incentive, and an expected income ability to offer higher prices to the factors of production than the person who only expects to get $8 for his product. So it is the expected valuations of what consumers would be willing to pay for products that sets a maximum limit on what businessmen think they can afford to pay to the resources and the workers out of which they can make those products. So if the cost to the tin miner is greater than the value of the tin he could mine, that is implicitly saying that those resources are more valuable to make other products that consumers are willing to pay higher prices for other uses and purposes and goals that they would like to achieve as well. And therefore, he shouldn't extract that tin out of the ground at this time and in this place. And those resources should be devoted to making other goods that have a more highly valued use in the eyes of the consumers, as judged by the entrepreneur who's deciding whether to employ them in the hope of earning a revenue in making those alternative products. The prices therefore serve as the least common denominator that encapsulates, reduces, combines all of the knowledge and information of the world about everything to act as the sufficient minimal information to guide every businessman and every enterpriser and every entrepreneur everywhere in the world, in our global economy, as to whether it is profitable or loss-making if I make a particular product. And also to decide how to make the product. Because there are different ways to make the same product. Labor might be expensive, but you might find that machinery, in comparison to hiring workers of a particular skill and type, is less expensive. So then you have to make a decision. Should I hire 10 workers to do a job and purchase and have them use relatively simple and less sophisticated tools and machines? Or should I invest in a much more complex and productive machine that one machine could do the work of 5 men? Well, what is the best way to produce the product? Investing in a machine that replaces 5 men to economize on the cost of labor? Or is the machine so expensive that even though it economizes on the work of 5 men, hiring those 5 men is less expensive than buying that labor-saving machine? So the prices of the market also assist the businessman in deciding what is the least cost method of producing. Do I use a lot of workers and economize on machines and tools and equipment? Or do I invest in labor-saving machines, tools, and equipment because that's less expensive than labor costs would be? And why are the labor costs so high? Because there must be some other businessmen who value that labor enough that they're offering those higher wages for those other jobs. That from your point of view makes them too expensive, and it is worth in economizing and investing in the labor-saving machinery instead. So not only are the prices telling businessmen is the value of the product they could manufacture greater than the costs that they'd have to incur to produce the product, it is also assisting him in deciding, well, how shall I make the product? With what combination of resources and raw materials and machines and labor shall I do it to minimize the expenses and not use resources that are more valuable for some other purpose in mind, when I could substitute that valuable resource and use something less expensive to still get the job done. And to do it in a way that minimizes my money costs relative to the money revenues that I think I can earn by comparing the selling price and the combined cost prices. This gives direction and orientation to everything in the world. And the significance to this is that this is crucial to be continuing to go on each and every day. Why each and every day? Because the world today is different than the world yesterday. And the world tomorrow will be different than the world today. Now, it could be in little ways or big ways. But each day is a little different. Things change all over the world. And in our interdependent and interconnected global world now, something that happens that 10,000 miles away, a change in consumer demands, a change in the availability of certain types of labor supplies, a change in the availability of certain types of resources, a change in the availability of and the cost of producing certain types of machines. That gets dispersed as information to everyone else in the market through changes in the prices for those machines, those resources, the employment of those workers in the form of wages to be paid. And everyone is constantly adapting and adjusting and modifying so that constantly and continually everything is tending to be in sync, balanced, coordinated. Now, perfectly? Of course not. We live in a world of imperfect people with imperfect knowledge who therefore sometimes make errors and mistakes. You undertake an enterprise, you think the product will be valuable to consumers, that the revenue you earn will exceed the cost you're going to have to incur to manufacture it, and guess what happens? You miscalculated. The costs end up being greater than you had anticipated, or even if the costs are what you thought they would be, it turns out the consumers are not as interested in your product as you had hoped for when you undertook the production today with the hope after the production process through time to have something to sell tomorrow. So you may suffer losses instead of earning profits. But that is part of the learning process of adapting and adjusting. That is what binds and connects everything that goes on in our global economy. That is why when you go into the stores, the goods that you want are there. And often in the varieties and in the qualities, with the features and characteristics you're looking for. And often at prices that, all things considered, you're willing to pay a lot of the time. That is only made possible in a world in which we as consumers are changing what our values about and preferences about what we want to buy. As producers, we find that we can produce things differently, or resources are more available, less available. Labor skills are more available and less available, to constantly and continually adapt and adjust to this. Now, if this system is going to be this dynamically adjustable, this successfully coordinating the actions of all of us, and I really want you to appreciate that this is like a miracle. Think of a world of what, 6, 7 billion people? That's a lot. And we are now increasingly all interdependent, right? How do you see that what people are doing on the other side of the world match what other people on the other side of the world either want or are doing themselves? This is amazing. Now, of course, it doesn't always get right, and the errors are made, and mistakes are experienced, and people suffer a loss instead of the profit they had hoped for. But even with all of these imperfections, in general, virtually all the time, everything works. And it has not been guided by anyone commanding it. Go make this product so Joe, 4,000 miles from now, will have something to eat 6 months from now. Nobody commands it. It's Adam Smith's invisible hand. Each person in the entire world is just pursuing their own self-interest. Why are you here at the college? I know you're wondering, why the hell am I here? But I know, why are you here at the college? Okay? Why are you here? What am I doing here? I don't know. Anyway, so why are you here? You're getting an education. Why do you want that education? Because you think that will give you a skill, an experience as reflected in the diploma that you hope to earn. That will make you marketable. Why do you want to be marketable? So you can earn a living. As well as hopefully having chosen a major or field that, all things considered, given that you want to have a job that, enables you to earn a salary, that you might like more than if you had majored and specialized in something else that you didn't find as interesting. You're pursuing your own self-interest. You're thinking about your own individual personal future. The income that you would like to have, so that over time you can have the standard of life that you would consider desirable and enjoyable. You're not thinking of how you fit in a global market system of exchange and production as one little ingredient in this overall coordinated process. But what is guiding you this? Well, what will I earn if I major in this? What type of income could I have if I majored in that? It is the prices of the market that are partly guiding you in your personal decisions. As an economist, I might have made a lot more money if I'd gone into business as opposed to teaching. Okay? So I forego what might have been a higher income if I chose to work in the business world as opposed to being a professor. Why did I do this? Because that's my trade-off. I enjoy teaching. To be honest, I enjoy the freer time of academic life to be able to have more time to read and to do the writing and to travel and give lectures like this for you. I enjoy what I do. I'm actually having a good time. So thanks for being here. So sometimes you give up income that you could earn instead by doing something else because you enjoy something else instead. That's fair enough. And having the freedom to make those choices and trade-offs. But in general, what is guiding most of our activities and our decisions as to what employments to search out for and the types of skills to acquire is greatly influenced by and guided by what we think will be the avenues, the directions that will enable us to earn a living and have a standard of life that we enjoy, the prices of the market. So you are being guided by Adam Smith's invisible hand. Each of you are pursuing your own self-interest, but to attain your own goals, you are choosing fields of activity for which you're acquiring an education that you hope will be marketable out there. And marketable means what? Having value to others who will find it worthwhile to hire you to do jobs for them. And why? So they, the employers, can succeed in making products or providing services to consumers, which involve all of us in our different roles in life, to make products that consumers want that are desired by them. So you are being guided by the invisible hand, and so are everyone else in the world. In a world that is constantly open to change and into which we constantly need to adapt. So prices make their little changes each and every day. The price of gasoline goes up a few pennies. The price of certain fruits go down in the market tomorrow. Why has the price of fruits gone down here and the price of a gallon of gas gone up a few pennies there? I don't know, and neither do you. And the point is, it's not necessary for us to know. Somewhere, for some reason, some types of fruits or vegetables, because of the supply conditions and the demand conditions, have become less expensive, and therefore their prices have dropped right now. For some reason, because of supply and demand conditions looking over the entire global economy, gasoline is more expensive. It either is less available or somebody's demand has gone up, resulting in a higher price of a few pennies per gallon. And therefore, you go to the gasoline station, oh, damn it, it's a few pennies more to fill up. What? It's not necessary for us to know. It is sufficient that we, in our own corners of life, adapt and adjust to decide well, is it worth economizing just because it's a few more pennies for a gallon of gas? Or maybe I will economize and try to, save on how much driving I do. Or, gee, more fruit is available as expressed in a lower price. Maybe buy a few extra, bananas or apples or something. Each of us adapt and adjust in our own corners of life to what the prices are basically telling us about the relative scarcities and availabilities of these things we desire, as expressed in the prices we have to pay and the trade-offs we're willing to make as we're spending our income. A little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. That's more expensive. I'll buy less of that and economize and substitute something else instead. And we're all adapting and adjusting, guided by these prices without any of us knowing the why or the where or the who. But we're all connected and bound together in this global system. This is a profound significance. Profound significance. The world could not work. We would not have our daily bread every day if it wasn't through these market prices and the ability of people to have latitudes, degrees of freedom to adapt and adjust as they think best in their own corners of the market that others can't appreciate the way each of us can in our own place in the world. The importance of this, an ethical or moral element to this, is that this is a way that all of us can get along, interact, participate, coordinate, match and mesh everything that we're doing without anybody having to force us, compel us, command us, beat us over the head. We are all free people. We go about our daily life, we decide what we want to buy, we're pursuing our careers, we decide to work a little bit more or a little bit less. All of us are free to do these things, yet our actions are all coordinated in a changing and dynamic world with what everyone else is doing. This is a great achievement. That is the power and the importance of the market. Each man is free, each woman is free, each individual is free. Yet through the prices of the market, all of us can get coordinated without anyone else having, like in a master plan, tell any of us how or what to do. And out of adapting and adjusting through these prices, we all therefore are better off. The price rises, that's a signal that I should produce more. The price goes down, that's a signal that perhaps I should produce less and shift into making something else that consumers value more highly. But the fact that that price has gone up relative to this price that I had been guided by that has now gone down. And we adapt and we adjust and we move and we shift. Like in a moving machine of multitudes of parts that every time one part changes for one reason, the other parts adapt and adjust. But there's no one guiding or commanding the machine as a whole. It is a spontaneous order of human interaction. That's an important concept. It's an important concept. A spontaneous order. Of human coordination. In other words, the way you would express it also is like from the bottom up. We all interact and decide what to do and adapt and adjust to what others are doing. And through these individual bottom-up adjustments and adaptations, the system, the world, economic, global community as a whole is constantly continuing to more or less fit together in this coordinated pattern without anyone having to impose the order from the top down. This is a profound basis of the free society, that we can all coordinate what everyone else is doing while leaving each of us the freedom to make our own choices as best seems appropriate in our individual corners of the world. Prices have work to do. If I can express this, prices are priceless. Okay? Prices are priceless. Why? Because none of this could go on without prices having the freedom and the adaptability and the adjustability to changing supply and demand conditions to constantly be telling us what others are doing to which we should adapt in various ways without knowing any of those billions of others. That is the importance of a free market price system. Because it is through prices that we are doing what? We're talking to each other. That's what we're doing. When I say I'd be willing to pay a price for this, or I don't think I could afford to supply it to someone else for less than a price of that, we're communicating with each other. Free market prices should be viewed as an expression of freedom of speech. Just as words on a page or my talking to you right here in this room, prices are communicating information between people. We're talking to each other through a signal. And it's only to the extent that the signal is free to reflect what we're saying can the signal do its job of coordinating all that we are doing in these as multitudes of billions of people in our individual separate parts of the world. That's why economists often argue that one of the worst things that a government or a series of governments can impose are price controls, in which the government sets a maximum price, thou shalt not charge more than X, or a minimum price, thou shalt not charge less than Y. Because then that is like covering someone's mouth. And don't forget that I said that. You can't understand what I'm saying. That's what happens with price controls. The price should go up because this is more scarce. The price should go down because consumer demand has decreased. How do you know that unless prices can tell the truth? So that people can continue to be coordinating what they're doing. One of the worst government interventions in a market is to try to set prices differently than how we cumulatively, in a composite way, are setting that prices by what we communicate to each other as suppliers and demanders each and every day in this changing world. Without prices, there is no successful market coordination. And without successful market coordination, we can have none of the qualities and the standards of living that we take for granted, which is dependent upon each of us interdependently coordinating with everyone else. Okay, let us take a couple of questions now, and we'll take a very short break after that. Any questions or comments? Yes?
I have a question
Sure.
about this free market system.
Sure.
I believe that there must be some sort of protection, at least for small, less developed countries, because you look at the United States, you look at China and Europe and all that, they've got hundreds of years head start on a small island state like us. After 9/11, the United States was concerned about their security, but we were concerned about basic things like food.
Right.
And if we had stimulated our farmers, let's look at water production, just simple water alone. Bottled water, we have a big problem with that in the country today, whereby you can import bottled water much, much cheaper than you can manufacture it here. We pay 9 times or 5 times the amount in electricity in order to manufacture a bottle compared to the American counterpart. And the thing is, we've got to look after ourselves, or at least on the short term. So the government must protect the small manufacturers here to produce sufficient water for just food security. At least, if we look at it in a global sense, I mean, we could end up starving in the short run. We can't do everything, but there's some basic things that we need to protect, rather than looking at it on the whole global system and saying, let's just, we're gonna do tourism and money gonna come in like that. Basic manufacturing, we've got to seriously consider that, even though it might be a little bit more expensive, but for our own survival, we need that because 9/11 taught us that.
Well, my answer to that is several. One, if the Bahamians really believe that domestic water is more valuable to secure than imported bottled water, then it's very simple. Consumers would be demonstrating that they prefer to buy the domestic, more expensive version than the imported bottles of water. The fact that people choose to buy the less expensive imported bottled waters shows what they really value. Now, if you're going to impose a protection that makes it more costly to import the foreign bottled water, to try to set up a trade wall to secure business for domestic bottled water manufacturers, then that's the government deciding that they know what is better in the interest of the people than themselves in their choices to produce. How do the political leaders know this? How do they have this knowledge and wisdom and ability? How do they know how much of a fall in the people's standards of living are worth sacrificing because they decide that there might be someday an emergency that may or may not ever occur, for which it's necessary to secure a domestic but far more expensive bottled water supply? Who should make these decisions? Who should make these decisions? I would argue the people themselves should make that decision. If there were to be a situation in which it suddenly became more expensive to import the bottled water, those higher prices and the expense of importing the bottled water would itself act as the signal for the profitability of domestic manufacture. And if domestic manufacturers believed that the circumstances that was bringing about a rise in bottled water imported from abroad was likely to be permanent, not a glitch where it's just a couple of months because of some immediate temporary circumstance, but a long-term trend, then it will itself become profitable for domestic manufacturers or foreign manufacturers to come in here and produce it here instead of importing it themselves if it seemed more profitable to do so. You're presuming that those in political authority can correctly anticipate the dangers and problems that may or may not occur years or decades ahead, and on that political basis and judgment, to raise the cost of living of the average citizen in this country to today and in the years after that. Now, ask yourself another dimension of this. Why would they decide that it was desirable to set up an import tax that makes it more expensive to import foreign bottled water? Might I suggest that maybe there is some domestic producer who has connections with those politicians, who precisely wants to have a secured monopoly market in his own country at the expense of the consumers, and he uses the rationale of some danger in the future to have the politicians who he gives electoral support to limit consumer availability of the less expensive foreign version of the product. So it depends upon your presumption that the politicians know better than the citizens themselves, and that in the very nature of the government setting up such regulations, it will not be guided, as we all know occurs every day in every country, including my own, that people want favors and privileges, protections, and anti-competitive regulations at the expense of the consumers of the society, so they can gain something that they cannot honestly earn by making the less expensive and better product on the market themselves. I think this is the avenue of putting unnecessary and untrustworthy power in the hands of politicians on the basis of the knowledge they claim to know, and that they will not be corrupted by the special interest groups who want to use their regulatory and restricting power to benefit their own particular companies at the expense of competitors and the consumers of your society. It is a wrong policy for the society to follow. And once you establish this precedent, well, why can't we set up a protection for domestic bottled water? If we're doing that, why can't we do it for this product and for this product and this? Well, why? If you make this exception, why not another exception and another exception? And before you know it, you've politicized the entire economy of your society, where decisions are not made by producers deciding what they could produce a product for, consumers what they'd be willing to pay for, but by politicians who are working hand in gloves with corrupt interest groups who want to gain things at your expense and make the standard of living of everyone lower than it has to be. This is a wrong policy trend to follow.
But does protectionism really work? Because, I mean, if you look at it like this, you said that really we need land, labor, materials, all
Right.
that to determine the price.
Right.
If we just hypothetically take a price, a number, and say, look, I'm going to sell bottled water for X amount, and you're going to take in all these other raw materials, which we know we do not have to begin with, right? And we have to price it.
Right.
Any way you look at it, even if you come up with a price that is supposedly be competitive, when you look at the global combination that creates the international price, we are still not going to be ahead. Now, one thing you did not mention was technology. I mean, I think that the model, I mean, the model that you mentioned is a little kind of historic, because, I mean, everything now has to do with computer technology, information gathering.
Yes.
All this information is gathered, and they determine whether or not you're in London, England, Africa, Caribbean.
Yeah.
They will determine. Then you have the next important component is slick advertising. They're the people who determine whether it's visibility, how it looks, what it's going to say, and that creates the price. And then when you come up with the price now, then they will say, when the price, the product, it says suggested market price, meaning that you're flexible. And they can vary the equation from item to item to come up with the perfect thing, whether it's operating at a profit or a loss, to determine whether or not you stay in business or you go to business.
Okay, first of all, I don't think the technology changes anything. Yeah. I think the fact that what technology does is it enables information to be communicated much more rapidly and much more efficiently. But it doesn't change the fact is that part of what that communication is telling people in the world of business and investment is what are resources worth, what are products worth, what are labor skills for particular jobs worth. And therefore they're able to more quickly learn things out and adapt and adjust. But the prices are still providing the same types of information, just more rapidly and effectively through the technologies. Something happens in Asia. It's not like 100 years ago where you have to wait for telegrams to arrive. You instantly know, and markets can now anticipate, well, something's happened in Asia, we better start adapting and adjusting that because the ripple effect is going to come very soon, and now we know that there's this potential ripple effect faster than if we had to wait for the old-fashioned letter through the mail to find out. So in fact, this enables more easy and instantaneous adaptation and adjustment, but it doesn't change the fact of the role of prices. Now, as far as advertising is concerned, advertising is a way of communicating information to people, and people are bombarded with constant forms of informations and attractions and distractions all over our lives. Now, people sometimes, well, advertising should just be information. But what's information? Information is only useful if it gets people's attention. Now, we are human beings, okay? And if you want to get my attention, you better say something loud or very, flashy. Because I'm busy, I'm thinking about my family, I'm thinking about my work, I'm thinking about things I have to do, I'm on my way to pick up the dry cleaning. You have to get my attention. And it has to be attractive. It has to be attractive. And there's also the fact that besides getting my attention, you have to demonstrate to me through the advertising why you think that product may be valuable to me. And you have to do so within a corridor of trustworthy information. Economists distinguish between two types of goods that can be influenced by advertising, what are called search goods and experience goods. A search good is that when I get an advertisement in the mail, the local market says, bananas on sale this week, perfectly ripened, ready to eat. And now I go to the market and I find out that when I go into the fruit and vegetable section that the bananas are not perfectly ready to eat. They're old, they're squishy and icky and yeah. Now, this is false advertising in the sense that they have promised something that didn't match up to what I discover before I buy it. If they deceive me with a search good, as the economist calls it, in other words, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can look at it, you can judge it before you put $1 down to buy it. So if the advertiser, if the company gives you information in their advertising different from what has been promised in reality, what turns out to be reality, you don't have to buy the product. And do you trust them in the future? You question them. So precisely because there are goods that you can examine before you buy it to judge that whether what the seller has promised is matched up by the reality, they are then put in the position that they are running the risk of losing your consumer business, their brand name reputation, if they fail to fulfill what has been promised in the advertising. The other type of good is called experience good. This is the kind of good, the full qualities, features, and characteristics the consumer cannot know without buying the good and using it for a period of time. A bed. You go into the mattress store, right? You lie down, you know, kind of feels comfy, but do you really know whether you're going to have a restful and comfortable sleep until you bought the mattress and slept on it for weeks or months? No. You buy a car. You go in to buy a car, you take a test drive, you punch all the buttons, ooh, this is nice. But do you really know how the car is going to handle in different weathers, different road conditions, until you've bought the car and used it for a period of time? How really safe it is on the road. You can do your research, you can read the magazines and the articles and the reports, but I mean, for yourself, no, you have to experience the good. Okay, you could go on, even a pair of shoes, right? I used this example yesterday. You go into the pair of shoes, you go into the shoe store, you try it on, it feels kind of comfy, it looks good, but have not some of us bought a pair of shoes? It felt good in the shoe store, but then after we've worn it for a few days or weeks, it's not a comfortable pair of shoes to stand in and walk on, you know, for a good number of hours during the day. A lot of us have had those experiences. That's an experience good. But even with experience goods, what is a seller dependent upon? Repeat business. The market where you do your shopping, your food shopping, they don't stay in business if you shop there once and never go back again. The shoe store does not stay in business if you buy a pair of shoes from them once and you never go back to that store for that brand name. Or a car. Yeah, how often you buy a new car? In the United States, the statistics show that the, quote, the average American family buys a new car once every 3 to 5 years. Okay, every 3 to 5 years. Now, it's true, I don't go into the car dealership every day. You going by that statistical average, once every 3 to, but every day someone is going into the automobile showroom, looking possibly to buy a new car. What is a crucial element in their decision to go into that particular showroom for that particular type of car? Oh, have you had that car before? Did you experience it? Did what was promised, the advertising, the information, match up to what you hoped for? Even with experience goods, where you can't really know it until you buy it and use it, the seller is interested in his brand name reputation for the purposes of repeat business and word of mouth. Oh, you know, I bought that car. Well, how terrible! It handles terribly. Don't even think of buying that kind of car. Does the car owner company want you to tell that to your neighbors? Of course not. They want you to say, oh, you're in the market for a car. You know, I've been driving this car for 2 years now. It's not bad. You ought to try it yourself. You know, go for a test drive. Right? They want that word of mouth reputation. It's the case with all products. Advertising must, at the end of the day, reflect degrees of truthfulness in their own self-interest so they don't get your business. Let me give an example of this about a car that my wife and I own. We have an Acura, which is the upscale Honda version of the car, right? It's more expensive, you know, upscale car. We had been leasing an Acura TL, the sedan. Now, this happened now about a year and a half ago. My wife and I were going to the university one morning to teach our classes. Now, while our classes began at the same time, we had different end times for our classes. So she was driving her car, this Acura TL sedan, and I was driving my car, a different Acura. So we're crossing a major intersection, and I cross the major intersection from where we live, and I look in the rear view mirror, okay? and I see my wife's car start to go through the intersection, and the next thing I see watching through the rear view mirror is this large, full-sized white van cuts in front of her, and I hear a crash. Now, I immediately made a U-turn, pulled the car to the curb, and I run to the corner. And what I'm looking at is the entire front of my wife's car has been smashed in. And there's smoke coming out. I'll be honest, I figured that she was either severely injured or dead. And I can tell you what went through my mind. That night, we were supposed to have company over for dinner. I don't know how to make the dinner. I mean, you have to have your priorities here. What the hell am I going to do? Bad. I know I'm bad. Very bad. Okay. So, now, but seriously, the front of her car was like an accordion smashed in. I really didn't know what to expect. And amazingly, she, obviously with the front smashed in, the driver door, was not moving, but she pushed it and she got out. I was amazed. I really thought that she was either injured or dead. Luckily, she had a slight, whiplash and a mild concussion, and the airbag had opened and the seatbelt, so she had like a little bruise on her chest. But I mean, compared to this, nothing. I mean, the insurance adjuster who then evaluated the car told us that I do this for a living. I see smash-ups all the time. He told my wife that he was surprised that she lived through the crash. Now, the car actually was repaired by the insurance company at a huge cost, because obviously that was still less expensive than the replacement cost to the lease company. But it wasn't working properly, because we had been thinking of buying it out when the lease ran out. But since it wasn't working properly after being repaired, we now have to decide what we're going to do. And I told my wife, listen, I know an Acura is a more upscale car. And even when you put down a down payment on a lease, obviously your monthly payments are going to be higher than a less expensive car. But I said, I don't care. Right? We'll adjust our budget. We're leasing another Acura for you to drive, because it's basically my wife's car. Okay? Well, when we're in it together, of course, the man I drive. But, it's her car. Okay, but it's her car. Okay, it's her car. And after seeing that, that the car is designed and constructed in a way that it can withstand such a severe impact. And by the way, I should mention the full-sized van that collided with her. It fell over on the passenger side and slid down the street, the equivalent of a block and a half.
Wow.
I mean, this was a huge impact. Now, luckily, the driver of that car was not really injured. She had some like bruises and minor cuts. It was like a miracle, both of them. But so this was bad. But I told her, I don't care. The car has met up to its quality reputation. Safe, crash resistant in this way. And I said, I don't care if, again, we have to adjust our budget. We'll put so many thousands of dollars down as the lease down payment again. The monthly payments would be higher than if we just got like a Honda Accord or something. I don't care. I want you safe. I don't know how to make dinner. So. Now, that's brand name reputation. Right? Because I can assure you, if my wife had been severely injured or killed, I would have been reluctant to buy another Acura. So advertising has to ultimately, within a corridor, have truthfulness. Now, does advertising often seem exaggerated? Right? There's the imagery of like, the slick sports car and the attractive babe lying on the hood of the car. Of course, come on. We're talking about people, right? There's sex appeal. Let's face it. We're all humans. But within that, advertising has to have this underlying truthfulness. Otherwise, they don't get your business, either because you don't buy it before you have to, because you don't have to. You could observe it, examine it before you buy it, or they will not have you repeat business if they experience things that have not matched up to what they promised. Okay, why don't we take a quick break now? About 10 minutes? Okay.